And we're back talking about universities and whether or not we need to be looking at reforming them. Harrison, before the break, we were talking about this notion that the people that are running universities are disconnected from society itself in terms of their ideas and the direction that they're taking universities in. We have political parties that have been elected across the partisan spectrum in this country for years now. They, in turn, when they form government, they appoint people to boards that hire and fire university presidents and so forth. And yet it seems like they all kind of drift towards the left side of the spectrum. Is that part of the problem? Is that maybe provincial governments aren't reining universities in to be a little bit more neutral in terms of, sort of the management and the day-to-day runnings of universities?
Absolutely. I would say so. I think one of the problems we see now is that conservative minded professors, academics who consider themselves to be conservative, don't want to put themselves through the ringer at these universities anymore. It's just not worth it for their own careers because we have this idea, of course, that students are right. There's this idea that there are, you can have your own truth and that there isn't one truth. This relativism that has come in basically leads to the notion that students who are there to learn are actually the ones who are right when they take absurd positions on social issues. So again, I think the problem is conservatives are abandoning the universities. We don't see that just with enrollment at university at a student level, but we see that with experts and with professors and academics who don't want to put themselves through the current state of these universities because, as they've seen, the administration, the people at the top of the university aren't going to be there to back them up when the students come eventually calling for their heads, because that's just what happens now. These students have been given so much power. The professors who are now at these universities, the majority of them at a lower level, are ideologues of the same bent to the students. So they come out for these conservative professors. They create an environment that does not allow for open dialogue. And we've seen the consequences of it, which is universities in general across our country drifting further away from the fundamental principles of what they should be, and instead are turning to essentially activism factories for students to come out of.
Mark, what's your take? Are universities too often are they activism factories, as Harrison has suggested, or are there still cases where they're still, pushing forward this idea of allowing people to express different views and opinions, or is it just, are they too biased?
Look, there's a failure to make critical distinctions, at least at some university campuses and from the top down. I don't think the solution is to have a premier of a province tell a university president what they can or cannot think. But what universities are not doing is thinking critically and making distinctions about free expression versus mob behavior. And this has been a problem since the 1960s in Berkeley, right? So the distinction is one pointed to by John Stuart Mill a century and a half ago in On Liberty, a text that should be taught more often, if it's taught at all even these days on university campuses. Mill said this: it's in favor of free expression. That was his entire book. But he said the exception is you can't have a mob in front of the corn dealer saying the corn dealer is starving us, and have the mob in front of his shop saying that, which is going to lead to, the murder of the corn dealer. So there's distinctions that need to be made on campuses. You want as much free expression as possible. What you can't do is shut down speakers. What you can't do is show up in front of the Jewish Center and blockade entrance. What you can't do is, incite people to mob behavior that's going to end in violence and someone getting hurt. Right? That's historically the distinction that's been made between actions and speech. And people are not making that distinction. University administrations are not making that distinction, and they should. And so where you go from that then is, look, if you're a student that prevents others from having free expression, not for calling for the murder of the Jewish person on campus, but free expression within the boundaries of John Stuart Mill, maybe universities ought to expel those students that engage in mob behavior or violence, and not refund their tuition. And that would send a very strong message. So I think that's where the administrations of universities need to be held accountable.
We got about 40 seconds left before the break, Mark, but how big of a problem is this? Is it just a case where there's a couple campuses that are making headlines and all universities are getting tarred with the same brush, or is it more of a systemic problem that we're seeing in Canada?
Well, we've got a survey of freedom of expression on university campuses coming out in about 2 months from the Aristotle Foundation. So we'll find out. But I suspect, again, that the headlines are showing the rot on university campuses. Everything from, again, celebrations of Gaza martyrs at the University of Alberta back in October, to again, some of the protests, some of the mob behavior at Concordia University in Montreal. So people are not getting the education they pay for, and administrations ought to be backing up the students who want to study and think.
Okay, listen, we'll be back with more right after this commercial break.